Great. Good morning, I think, still. Good morning, everyone. Okay, now. Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. We are going to begin. I'm Stephanie Hausner from the Israel Action Network. Today's conversation is we're bringing together a multitude of topics, but all actually, and it might have seemed a little unclear maybe on the topic, but they all do fit very nicely together. We're going to be talking about social innovation, coexistence and cooperation programs, Palestinian economic development, and so today we have a lineup of excellent speakers. Their bios are all in your apps, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on that, but we're going to hear from each of the esteemed speakers that we have here, and then I'm going to ask them each a question, and then we're going to open it up to all of you to ask questions as well. So I will now turn it over to Ambassador Yehuda Yaakov, who is formerly the Consul General in the Boston area, so some of you might know him from that, and now works at the Foreign Ministry, and he will tell you a little bit more about what he's working on.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thanks for coming. Thanks. Hey, Jeremy, how you doing? Thanks for having me. From Start Nation to Impact Nation. Look at that picture. We'll get back to that in a minute. Beyond the fact that it's an excuse to have my name in there, there's all sorts of things going on there. They are basically my passes to various conferences that took place in Israel in the last few months. Stephanie, you're the person I have to...
Yeah. This is okay. We're having a lot of, okay,
Yeah?
well.
There you go. Basically, this talk, very briefly, is about shared values. I know there's a lot of talk about it. Do they still exist? What are they? And they are relevant to our children and grandchildren. And that's a question I'd like to answer the next 5 minutes or so. The other way. It's okay. There you go.
These are having a slideshow issue this conference. So.
Okay. I'll start with a basic question. Does it seem to you like Israel is losing its interest in social equality? How many would say yes? How many would say no? Yeah, okay, maybe so. We're not so sure. The headlines don't look so good. You'll see in my bio I'm involved in civil society for Ethiopians as well. It's the issue. That's the example I put up here. I know I saw the New York Times headline when this was happening, Israel's Black Lives Moment. So I understand where the question would come. My answer, next slide. The answer is, obviously I'm representing the Israel government, so it's obvious what my answer is, that we are in the deep throes of advancing social equality in Israel. At the government level, at the civil society level, certainly. And you'll hear more about that from Revital. From the private sector as well, which you hear much less about. And that particularly since, I would say, the ALLMEP administration, 26 particularly, we are in an accelerated process of advancing social equality in Israel. Not something that we hear about a lot, not something that we're focused on a lot, but the facts speak for themselves. And I think that we have the president's, you don't have to move it back in, the president's speech in 2015 was a seminal moment in Israel. Not that he said anything which wasn't in place, becoming in place already. But he was able to frame it in such a way which focused society on the need to move to a partnership amongst all its representatives. I put here a few people, there are a lot more, to put some faces to the issue. Because one of the things that we have sensed is that even amongst those who would agree that Israel is in the throes of a social equality process, it's not always clear that there are actually people who are doing this. And these are just some. Some you may be familiar with. I know Mariam Kaba was here in Washington recently, and was also in New York, so she may be more familiar. The others may be a little less so. But all people who are working 24/7 to accelerate the social equality process. Which brings me to the next issue. Marginalizing Israeli-Arab. You've heard about the Chok Le'om, the national identity issue, and other issues, obviously, protests in the Arab sector over community safety, and so on. And by the way, as I go through this, you will probably sense that when we're talking about social equality issues, there's no room for BS here. It's totally transparent. It's totally what it is. Okay? And there are successes, and there are lacks of success. We have to talk about them all. So, yeah, you can go to the next. Jump. Yeah. So, I said we had the president's speech in 2015. Something else very important happened in 2015. In a sense, the Israeli government under Netanyahu took the process begun by ALLMEP about a decade before and jump-started forward and decided on, I put the 12 billion shekel figure here. The commitment is between 12 and 15 billion shekels. And since this decision, it has been felt throughout society. No matter where you look in Israel, there is a sense that Israel is now on an accelerated process of the partnership, of the integration of its Israeli minority. Not everybody accepts that. Not always the slogans and jargon are dovetailing with that. But at the end of the day, in every single thing here that I put up, local authorities, infrastructure, education, including differential education, economy, employment, and community safety, is throughout the country. And this is real money. This isn't a 5-year plan, which is just, in somebody's bottom drawer. This is real money, which is flowing. And every relevant Israeli ministry, body is involved in this, and I'll go through a couple of examples. I want to highlight one here, maybe two, because I know we're going to deal with this with Revital. First of all, the high-tech accelerators. There is very robust talk in Israel, and it's in the conferences, and it's in Demarker in Hebrew, and you don't see it too much in English, but there is a lot of talk about the fact that, as the headline of, I think, a Tsofen-driven article in the Arts, the Arab entrepreneurs are coming in droves, right? Is that the title? That we are now looking at a very rapid movement of Israeli Arab entrepreneurs and innovators into the Startup Nation space. I personally do not use Startup Nation, but just for terms of reference. And the other is community safety. For years, there had been an argument within Israeli Arab society about what is the role of the police. And a couple of months ago, Israeli Arabs came out in the streets en masse and said, we want the police in our communities. We want community safety. And a couple of years before that, Israel appointed its first deputy commissioner from the Muslim community. As a result of that, hundreds have joined the police force, new stations are opening, and there is this gradual process of confidence building, which is underway. Just one example, how many, do I have 2 minutes?
Yes, 2
Okay, 2 minutes. One example of how this money, how we're seeing it in real time, and that is in the education sector. Led by Professor Yafa Zilberschatz at the Council for Higher Education, and the steering committee run by Professor Muna Maron, which is one of Israel's leading women achievers. Forget about whether she's Jewish or Arab, whatever. The statistics are overwhelming, and they have long-term significance within society. And it's the programs that they're doing, as you can hear, starts in high school, and then goes up and kind of shepherds them through. One of the biggest places where the success we're seeing is at the Technion, of course, which you've probably heard about. All right, this will be my last thing. Neglecting the periphery. In Israel, I don't know if you use it too much in the United States. In Israel, the periphery is a buzzword. The periphery in Israel is social, it's demographic. You can live in Kiryat Gat and not be a part of the periphery. You can live in Tel Aviv and be a part of the periphery. And this whole discussion is about how do we get those in the periphery into the center. Okay? Next slide. The leading way to do it is through employment, not just getting people jobs, because unemployment in Israel is very low, but it's upgrading employment so that Arabs, Ultra-Orthodox women, etc., get into the mainstream. Income goes up, and we're already seeing this happen, particularly amongst Ultra-Orthodox women and Arab women. It has long-term potential, of course, vis-a-vis what happens within the communities themselves. But there's no doubt that when it comes to employment, there's a lot going on, and that women are taking the leading role. We'll skip this. I'll leave you with this thought. No matter what session you go about Israel, it'll be about disagreement. This is one thing that Israelis do not disagree about: social equality. Everybody expects for things to come up, and I think that it's fair to say that just like amongst human beings in the Israeli government, you can be both conservative and progressive at the very same time. Thank you very much. Stole a minute of your time.
That's okay.
Now you're
I
good,
told you
you're
you did.
good. Okay, we're gonna shift this over, and we're gonna hear from Revital from Tsofen about how some of these projects are coming to be in terms of economic development and particularly Arab society in Israel.
So, hello everybody, thank you for coming. I couldn't ask for better build-up than Yehuda made here. Tsofen mission is to bring the high-tech industry into the Arab society, and I'll try to bring the vision and the mission in Tsofen. I accompanied Tsofen 5 months ago. I used to work for the high-tech industry for 22 years, and then I was a fellow at Mandel Leadership Institute, trying to advance unrepresentative population into the high-tech industry. And I think that this vision of myself and the vision of Tsofen are coming together into the mission and the everyday work we do in Tsofen. So Tsofen was founded 2008 by 3 amazing people. My is Sami Sadi, still in Tsofen, and we have a public council leading by high-tech opinion leaders, Dadi Perlmutter and Professor Ziad Khana, both of them former Intel managers, executives, and we are trying to bring the vision of shared society when the technology and the high-tech industry, I think, is the tool, and it brings the need of the Israel society into the real everyday life, to bring human capital, quality human capital into the high-tech industry. So you can see that we work in both sides of the demand and the offering, while this is a business case also, while the offering is coming from the high-tech industry. And we are working with the human capital, the quality human capital we have in the Arab society, graduates of high-tech fields from the best universities in Israel, who has some barriers to get integrated into the high-tech industry. And I try in a very short time to give you a taste of what we are doing in order to bring the need and the offering into the same place and to bring the high-tech into the Arab society. So we have some programs that are dealing with the human capital, and we are building an ecosystem which is very important for the high-tech industry. Usually we know that getting into the high-tech industry, it's by friends pulling friends. It's about 40% of the human resource in the high-tech industry are coming from networking, and that's what we are trying to do, to building the community of the high-tech human resource in the Arab society. It's a great challenge, and we are doing many activities, both with Jewish and Arabs together, because we want them to meet, to know each other, and then to open doors to the high-tech industry. And we're working also with the government. It's very important. I'll show you then how the government is an important and significant player in our activities and vision and fulfill our vision.
I'll give you $100 after.
Yeah. It's not enough, you know. Yeah. I think that the results can talk by themselves, and we can see that from the start when Tsofen make the its breakthrough, so we can talk today about thousands of students, about thousands of employees, and we still have a lot of potential. And you also can see the investment of the government, and it's all together can be seen that in this graph you can see how every step was supported by the government. We had in our first steps a joint venture with the government, and then it became to bid, and it's in all areas. We have resolutions. You just talked about the 922 resolution, so it's the 5 years plan, and with all these resolutions and work with the government, we can see the impact of Tsofen and bringing it, we hope, to mainstreaming the high-tech into the Arab society. But it's very important to say two main things. First, that we would like to make it in both directions. It's not only to bring the employees into the high-tech industry, the Arab human capital, it's also to bring the high-tech industry into Arab cities. It's both directions. It's very important to understand it that even from gender perspective, if it's located in 15 parks in Israel, high-tech parks, it's very difficult and challenge to bring Arab women into these parks. And the real shared society, it can be also in Arab city. We see it in Natzeret. Today in Natzeret there are about 40 companies, high-tech companies. We see a real shared society in these companies, while the Jews from the Galil are coming to Natzeret, working with Arab engineers together on everyday basis. And this is our vision and the fulfillment of our vision, and we would like to duplicate it in our goals. So it's very important also, together with the government, to have another park, funds by the government in the Galil and in the Triangle, and hopefully also in the Negev, so we can also bring the high-tech into Arab cities for a shared society. Yeah. 3 weeks ago, you just remind me, there was a resolution to build a park, a high-tech park in Natzeret. It's next to the park was built by Steph Wertheimer, also in Natzeret. So we can enlarge the number of engineers that are going to work in Natzeret, and we hope to have in very soon another park in the Triangle. And we are working on it together with the representatives of the government. Tsofen was requested by the Arab Mayor Committee to lead the next resolution of 923, and we are now had a bid, and Deloitte was the consulting company who helps us to to make this idea into a real offering to the government, how to build the high-tech, the chapter of the high-tech in this next resolution. And we hope we have very soon a government that we can bring it to its table and to advance this idea. It's a huge change. You just talked about the Arab society and the state of mind that was changed because the mayors understood that bringing the high-tech into their cities can be a game changer. And economically, and they are a great partner of us today, and we are leading it together. I just want to show you a very short. Okay.
Well, we had a little bit of a. Okay.
Yeah, I just want. I can share with you this movie. I just want to say that everything it starts with education. So we hope to enlarge our activity in the high-tech, in the high schools in the Arab society, and we wish to have in this strategic step more and more students coming into the high-tech fields in the academia and then to the high-tech industry. I remind that we less of 15,000 positions in the high-tech, which bring to a huge gap and social gaps and economical gaps in the Israeli society. And I want to thank our partners and to our supporters, including the government of Israel and USAID and Israel Embassy and also the American Embassy in Israel. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. That is a good transition. It's like we did this on purpose. to Kevin Rachlin, who is the U.S. Director of ALLMEP, the Alliance for Middle East Peace. And for those of you who remember 2 years ago, here at the 3 years ago maybe, at the JCPA conference, we took up a resolution supporting the Partnership Peace Fund, which he's going to talk a little bit more about, which really talks about some of these economic development initiatives and people-to-people programming that we find so important in this work. So, Kevin.
Thank you, Stephanie. So hi, everyone, and thanks for having me here at the plenum. I'm excited, and it's my first time back at the plenum in almost 5 years, so excited to see everything happening. Can you guys hear me without a microphone, or you're good? Awesome. So I want to tell you a little bit about ALLMEP, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about our flagship initiative and how our members actually use economic development in terms of peace building, and how our idea to scale that up dramatically within Israel and Palestine. So first things first, ALLMEP is the largest and fastest growing network of peace builders within Israel and Palestine. Our members range from the super tiny organizations like Road to Recovery, which takes people from the checkpoints to Israeli hospitals so that they can receive terminal care, and then back to the checkpoints, the Palestinians back to the checkpoints, to some of the more larger organizations out there, such as Tsofen, the Perez Center, if you've ever heard of that, and even organizations like Combatants for Peace or the Parent Circle Bereaved Families Forum. So we range across the board in terms of the work that we do. But our members believe to be part of ALLMEP, we believe in a couple of main tenets. The first is, that a peaceful solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has to be a viable and sustainable future that includes freedom and dignity and security for all of those people, for all people involved. And the reason why our members do the work that they do and how they engage in the work that they do is about reversing the sustained dehumanization and racism that is really holding back the cultural of both societies in terms of how the peace process is being pushed forward. Our members add a bit of stability and a bit of hope in difficult times, particularly now, and really push forward a stronger environment towards peace. And ALLMEP itself does this in a couple different ways. The first is we lead our community, we act as the voice of our community by bringing our members together, Tsofen and other organizations, to really enhance best practices and push forward what it means to do peace building within Israel and within Palestine. It's really critical to do that. The second is we amplify our members' voice, and I think that is something that I'm going to be touching on a little bit more there. And that's not just about advocating for increased funding from U.S. governments or other communities or the European governments to this space, even though it is greatly needed, but it's really about how to make sure that the membership that we represent, 120 members, that the work that they are doing is known to a vast community around the world. A lot of the times when you talk about this work, it is very, people think of it more as what we jokingly say hummus work. It's people sitting around a table and eating hummus, but it's so much more. You've just heard from Revital, who's one of our members, about the amazing work that they are doing out in Israel. And there are so many more organizations that are doing things like that, even on a broader sense, engaging on climate change, engaging on economic development, on strengthening civil society within the West Bank. There's so much that's out there to be done. And it's our job to really make sure that they have a voice both here in the American context, but also in the European and the world context. As part of that, one of the things that ALLMEP has really prided itself on is how to grow the membership, and more importantly, how to make sure that we can create a dynamic change on the ground within Israel and Palestine to create a constituency for peace. And we've kind of honed in on one key point of doing that, and that idea is creating an international fund for Israel-Palestine peace. And the idea came from a prior initiative that the world took on several years ago, actually in the 1980s, called the International Fund for Ireland. And this was created by Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill back in 1986. And the idea was that basically both sides of the Northern Irish conflict were not speaking with each other. There was more violence per capita than ever before, including in 2017 in Israel. And there doesn't seem like to be peace in sight. And so what the world stage did was essentially say was, enough is enough. These partners are unable to come to an agreement together. We need to create the next generation of peace activists on the ground in Northern Ireland, so that when the time comes that there is political pressure, there's political incentive to create peace. And what they did was they created what's now known as the International Fund for Ireland, which married people work, this reconciliation work, this idea that to create a peaceful environment, to understand what the other is and take away the dehumanization and racism that's there, you actually have to see them, exist with them, talk with them, and engage with them on a real level, and then pairing that, which is really critically, to economic development in the region, inside Northern Ireland, which was creating new jobs, finding spaces for them to work, doing new construction projects, tearing down some of the walls that were there, that were privately built. But rather than doing one or the other separately, pairing them together. And they invested over $1 billion in that effort over 10 years. And because of that effort, the people that negotiated the Good Friday Accords essentially said, George Mitchell said he was unable to do this without the International Fund for Ireland. So we took a step back and said, why not Israel-Palestine? This is a similar, there's so many similarities between Ireland and Israel and Palestine in so many ways, but they are very different at the same time. What if we take the work that our members are doing, groups like Yad V'Yad, who have a waiting list of 800 families wanting to get into their school systems, the Middle East Entrepreneurs for Tomorrow initiative by MIT or Our Generation, what if we gave them the resources to dramatically scale up their programs to impact society both within Israel and within the Palestinian territories? What would that look like and how would it work? And so we've been able to trying to create an international fund for Israel and Palestine. And what this would do is essentially do exactly what they did in Ireland, which is insert a very high number of dollars into the sector to give our members and give the sector a opportunity to dramatically change their programs, build them up, and allow more people to participate in them all at the same time, pairing that with economic development. And for that is actually really quite remarkable. And as Stephanie said, when it comes to the International Fund, JCPA and other organizations, we're happy to report that a new initiative by the U.S. government is being pushed forward called the Partnership Fund for Peace Act, which we're actually advocating on tomorrow. So if you're around, please come, it'll be great. But what that bill essentially does is allocates $250 million by the U.S. government over 5 years, so $50 million per year, to peace building and economic development initiatives within Israel and Palestine. And the economic development initiatives are really quite remarkable. It's the first time in many years that there's been a positive bill in Congress that affects both Israelis and Palestinians. But what's more remarkable is that it allows Israeli Palestinians and Palestinians to sit in the driver's seat in terms of economic development, that they are the ones that are going to have to initiate with another partner. They are the ones that, before they get capital. And that's really critical, considering right now, when you look at the Palestinian economy, it is probably the worst it has ever been, and the forecast going forward is even not looking like it will be any better. It's at 26% unemployment rate right now, and it's continually decreasing GDP per capita over the next year or so. It's gone down about 2% this past year. They expect it to go down another 2% in the coming year. So there really is a need for increased investment inside the West Bank and inside the West Bank at this point in time towards economic development. And the members that we work with and serve really are primed to take that on. Not only Tsofen, but also, as I said, MEET, there's Yad V'Yad, and even other groups that are not doing tech, but are doing rural agricultural work. Near East Foundation has a program called Olive Oil Without Borders, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a group, this organization saw that there was a surplus of Palestinian olive oil and that there was a deficit of Israeli olive oil. And how do we pair those two together? How do we get both the Israelis and the Palestinians to work together to both share an increased economic growth for oil, considering that it's such a strong export for both societies. And so what they did was they created this new program that allows Palestinian farmers to pair with Israeli millers and actually make sure that they actually benefit from the projects going forward. USAID is involved with this. The EU is involved with this. It's really one of the most remarkable programs that is out there. It's increased over $1 million or more in the past year or two in terms of how that has been doing production. So those are just a handful of ideas that we're working on right now and how the partnership fund can really affect that. I'm talking very fast and I know we're short on time, so I'm going to kick it back over to Stephanie.
Great. So I'm going to ask everyone to I'm going to ask you a couple of a question each. I'm going to ask you to keep your answers short because I want to give the opportunity for as short as you all can, because I want to give the opportunity for those in the audience to also ask questions. So we'll start with Yehuda. Why is the foreign ministry working on this now? Why is this a priority of the Israeli government? And how does that impact, how does that fit in with the work that our consulates are doing here in the United States? And how might we plug into those efforts?
Well, I think at the most basic level, this is what we decided the foreign ministry was to rectify to rectify maybe an error that we had made over time. In Israel, there's a very robust, what I call the social governmental ecosystem. 17.5% of the GDP, I think, is social spending, as opposed to defense, 4.3%. You know, he's got this huge, governmental industry, people, working hard, taxpayers' money going into all this. And the foreign ministry, for better or for worse, didn't really have a concept of how we interacted with them. And we started to look at this about 2 years ago. I was still in Boston, by the way, Jeremy, when I was already doing this. And we said, okay, how can we make the foreign ministry relevant on 2 levels? First of all, let's call it raising awareness. First of all, the first level, so that our friends, that our own employees actually know that this thing exists, and that there are resources tapped in, people, projects, and so on, and that the trend is happening. But at the second level, we have about 100 missions across the globe. Why not harness their presence and their resources to try to bring in to Israel best practices when it comes to social equality? And to export what works in Israel. Something I know Tsofen is involved in our consulates, or our missions are working with Tsofen, I know, to move that process forward. So kind of fast forward 1.5 years since we started that. We think we're onto something. I can tell you that I get a lot of love from the Israeli governmental people, who in the beginning said, where you people been all our lives? And now feel that finally somebody is recognizing them, even representing them. As far as Israeli society, you asked, or Israeli government, I think it's a natural process. It started, I placed the beginning at Yitzhak Rabin, when he started talking to the Israeli Arab society and saying, you are a part of us. And then when then Prime Minister ALLMEP set up the Bureau for Economic Development in the Arab sector. And I think that there is a recognition in Israel that what President Rivlin says is something that we need to implement, that we are 4 tribes, and we need to live together, and that we need to prosper together.
Great. So that leads actually really nicely into our, we're doing so well on this.
Wait, Stefan, I just want to, as far as resources go, part of the project is also internet, websites, information. If anybody's interested in my expanded PowerPoint, just give me your card, and I'd be happy to, either through Stephanie or directly.
Yeah, we could probably add it to the ad. So my question is for Revital, and kind of taking what you just said is, in 2015, right, the government of Israel approved Resolution 922, which was probably the most substantial investment in economic development for the Arab sector. We're now in it was a 5-year plan, we're now in year 5, you mentioned a little bit, 923. What do the next 5 years have ahead of us, and what are, you mentioned Duek, but what are, what's kind of the process now, and how can we also kind of engage in that process?
Okay, can we move to the sheet? But I can start and say that the main idea is to make a mainstreaming.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. Let's see. Just going to.
Okay.
Some technical issue.
Do you want to just go? I don't know why it's not working.
Okay, so, never mind. So first, from the human capital perspective, we would like to have more and more engineers coming into the high-tech industry, and we still work very hard to enlarge the number of the engineers, the graduates of the high-tech fields from the universities, and from the government side, we wish to have 2 high-tech parks and to bring into Arab cities. We would like to have one in the Galil, active parks, yes. We have the resolution, the last resolution, that it's going to be built in Nazareth, but we want it to be built and active, and also in the Triangle. And we also want to start working in the Negev, which has also a huge potential with the Bedouin. We start a pilot this year, so we hope in 5 years to have also the Bedouin from the Negev in the high-tech industry. And I think these three main issues, and it's all, as I said, about education. So we want to have our program that now is only in a few high-tech schools, high schools. We would like to have it as a mainstream in all Arab high schools, because we open door for, it's called, in the US you call first generation of academia, I called it in the Arab society first generation of high tech, because we know that it's not only to talk about it, but we have not only one influencer on high school graduate decision. In the Arab society, they go through, like in the US, from the high school to the academia directly. They don't have the few years of the army as we have in the Jewish society. And it's very important to explore the high-tech opportunity, both to the parents and to the educational people around the students, because they themselves are not aware to this opportunity. So we work with all these agents, social agents, to have them on the train together with us, and to bring the opportunity to the high school students. And we would like to have it as a mainstream in the educational system of Israel. So I think it's enough for 5 years.
And Kevin, we, 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, it seems maybe that was about that time, President Trump introduced a peace plan that talked about economic development in Palestinian communities. How does the work of the Partnership Fund and some of the CMM funding that the United States government has been giving, how does this all relate to each other? And what are kind of some of the trends that you're seeing in terms of United States support for Palestinian, Arab, Israeli economic development?
That's a big question. So just to talk a little bit about the peace proposal, you know, from our standpoint, it was kind of a disappointment, simply because there wasn't engagement of the Palestinian side at all in that scenario, and that kind of made us, in terms of those who are pushing for peace, who actually are representing the peace builders on the ground, and the community that is trying to create a lasting society towards peace, very disappointed. And actually, in terms of the work that our members do, made it even more important that they continue to operate, and not only that, but that they are trying to reach out to communities that they haven't seen or engaged with before, particularly when tensions are so heightened between Israeli Palestinians and Palestinians proper. It's really a tumultuous time over there. In terms of the U.S. engagement and how the proposal impacts economic development within the territories, I think that it's kind of hard to see this proposal as anything but disingenuous when it comes to that issue, and I'm being as honest as I can about this. The administration has cut aid to the West Bank and to Gaza the last 4 years, 3 years or so, and has no intention to really to move it forward at all. And when they released the economic development plan in Bahrain, they actually highlighted member organizations of ALLMEPs that they had cut the funding to not more than a month before that, and say that these are these are what you should be identifying. These are the flagship organizations that the world should be funding. But at the same time, the U.S. actually pulled back on that funding even before that. So that was a real disappointment. In terms of the trends that we're seeing, I think what's important to remember is that Congress and the United States population have continually supported economic development inside Israel and inside Palestine. This is something that has been essential to promoting peace and promoting the peace process. And when it comes to the different organizations that are out there that are trying to engage in this, you're seeing robust engagement from both the Israeli side, from individuals like Yaakov, who is a social venture capitalist inside Tel Aviv, to others that are in Palestine, just in terms of looking at Wabi and how that is growing, a growing high-tech sector out there. It's really quite remarkable at how, despite the political challenges that are out there, there are individuals and there are people, and that there are organizations that are willing to take the political and social risk to engage with the other side to increase both the economic development both in Israel and in Palestine. But I think in terms of trends, the one that's most disturbing to me actually is something that Revital just mentioned, which was that as Palestinians and also as Israeli Palestinians are going through secondary school and as they're finishing up and as Israelis are going into the army and they're going into college or to postgraduate degrees, what we're seeing happening is that in the West Bank there are these individuals that are getting these masters and these PhDs in really important STEM subjects such as engineering are leaving the West Bank because there is no opportunities for them there. They're either coming into Israel or they're even more, they're going overseas, they're going to Europe, they're coming to the United States to do their startup incubators. And the real reason is that there's no incentive for them to risk their livelihoods and their lives and their economic security to try to create a startup inside the West Bank. And that's what the Partnership Fund is exactly designed to address, is that there is this brain drain happening in the West Bank, and it's critical that if that society, if that area is to continue to grow, that there must be a way to keep those individuals inside the West Bank and give them the risk-free capital that is needed to take the risk to create a new social venture without having risk financial ruin, that there is a safety net there for them, and the Partnership Fund provides that, so it's really critical to look at it that way. But overall, I would say that the growing trends of just brain drain happening and what that looks like is really quite disturbing. And I hope that as we are examining the Trump peace proposal, and as we're trying to figure out the best way forward when it comes to engagement between Israelis and Palestinians, that we kind of take into our minds that both reconciliation work between both people, but at the same time economic development is quite critical, but it can't be happening on somebody else's timeline, on somebody else's basis, that it has to be mutual and it has to be pushing forward together.
Great. We don't have a lot of time, actually, but it's fine. There'll be lunch, hopefully, still. No, I'm just
We'll
kidding.
be around.
But I wanted to give the opportunity if anyone has a question. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is if you could both ask your questions and then we'll answer it. So, yes, first.
I'm more interested in what you refer to as the triangle, which I believe that's four cities that are in the peace plan that are supposed to go into the Palestinian entity. And they are objecting to that. So, am I correct?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
because I can't see. So how does that impact on the work that we're doing, both you and you? You know what I'm talking about?
Okay, wait, we're gonna get the other
Okay.
question and then we'll answer
That's
both at
fine.
the same time. Yes.
I remember in the book Startup Nation, they said that one of the incubators for innovation was the networking that took place between people who had served in the Israeli military. So I'm wondering since the Israeli Arab population doesn't have that experience, what offsets, programs there might be to get them involved in networking.
Two very good
Very
questions.
good question.
Okay, so let's start with the first question.
Do you wanna do triangle?
Revital, do you want to start the first question?
I'll do the focus side of it.
And then
Yeah.
we'll go to the second question?
Or do you want me to go? So I'll quickly on the Trump, at least maybe on the triangle. I think it's important, and you can speak as your organization actually operates in the triangle. Yes, the Palestinians and have rejected the proposal that the triangle be included as part of the new Palestinian state. But I think it's also important to remember that the proposal itself has been, at large, has been rejected by the Palestinian Authority because they were not included in the negotiation process of that proposal. And so I think that's important to remember, but also in terms of the reality of the situation is that there will have to be a reconciliation of what that means and what the triangle looks like. I'm curious from your perspective of how the actual operation on the ground is interacting given that.
So we continue as usual with our plans because I think it's very new and we are not sure what is going to be actually. And we hope that the triangle is a very huge place, and we have many cities in the triangle. So we continue as usual by now because we learn and we see what is going to be in actual. Yeah.
I'll just add to that, the Prime Minister's office has basically, in diplomatic terms, rejected that piece publicly.
But also, I think that in addition to all of that, is that remember it's a proposal. That this is nothing is set in stone yet. There's nothing that has been done overall with it, and I think that's an interesting point to bring up. Is that there are portions of the proposal that have been rejected by the Israelis. There have been portions that have been rejected by the Palestinians, and portions that have been rejected overall. And so I think that for us, we need to just remember that as we're going forward, is that this is just a proposal on the table. I don't know if it will go anywhere, to be honest. And so I think it changes how we talk about the peace process going forward.
And I think that this is the first time that a map was part of the proposal itself, and I think there are some interesting pieces of that map. But to Kevin's point, it's a beginning of a conversation that hopefully will happen, or at least a start-off point. And so I think we have to kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah, I just don't want to bring it into the framework that we have 20% of the Arabs in the Jewish in the Israeli population, and we have only 3 to 3.5% of them in the high-tech industry. So we have a lot of work to do with the Arab society in Israel to bring them into the high-tech industry.
So let's talk about the army and how
I'd like to start with I think it's a great question, I'm glad you asked it. One of the possible models to overcoming the challenge that you mentioned, and it is a challenge, is a project, it's actually a neighboring project at Tsofen called Hybrid Ma'of, which is, it's a great example of that kind of three-sided partnerships I've talked about. There's a government piece, and there's a private enterprise piece, and there is a civil society piece. And what they have done basically is they partnered. They were able to bring in, I guess everybody knows what the 8,200 Intel unit is, an elite unit in Israel. They brought in the graduates of that program who had gone on to the private sector and made lots of money. And they brought them in as partners, among other things, to help break the glass ceiling that exists as per what you've asked. And that program has been very successful so far. They have a different model than Tsofen because they bring the people into Tel Aviv to integrate Israeli-Arab entrepreneurs into the Tel Aviv scene, probably more so than Arab society itself at the moment. And that model, that seems to be a model that can work, having the Israeli Jewish entrepreneurs that have succeeded, bring them into the process, bring them into the partnerships, and help them break the glass ceilings that exist.
I can add, in addition to Yehuda, that we have a training courses. It's a boot camps that, from my perspective as a former manager in the high-tech industry, this is the game changer, because at the end of the day, when you took a CV of someone who finishes army service in a technological unit and excellent graduate of high-tech field in the academia, you choose the one with the experience and the practice he had before. And the boot camps give the Arab the opportunity, the equal opportunity to make a real project for high-tech company and to have the experience. We call it the 21st capabilities and to have the real experience how the high-tech industry working and all the skills needed for the high-tech. And this is a game changer from my perspective. And we hope to enlarge the number of trainers that we have every year. It's about hundreds now, and we hope to have more and more.
Okay, so we are going to end on that note with the idea that we're hopefully going to have more and more, which I think is a good, hopeful piece. Lunch is next, and so it'll be downstairs where we had lunch yesterday with the exhibit hall. But our speakers will be around during lunch if people have additional questions for them, and then all the same sessions will be offered for the second round right after lunch. Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you.